Good morning, family. I have a couple of housekeeping notes before I start in on the lesson. I know that's all your guys' favorites, but Dan mentioned that we do have a prayer meeting. It'll be on the last Wednesday of each month. If you're hesitant to come because you don't know what's going on, you don't have to listen to me. Like, I don't talk at all. Okay, so basically, we get together, we socialize a little bit, come up with a prayer list, talk about answered prayers. We have a public prayer, and then I usually read one or two verses, and then we kind of split up. Men go with men, and women go with women, and they have a more of a small group prayer, and that's the whole service. So if prayer is something that you want to grow in or something that you feel gifted in, we encourage you to utilize those gifts and to come. For those of you who have need, the men and women in the prayer group have expressed a desire to serve you. So if you're in need of somebody to pray for you, if you are somebody who find that you just really want to know somebody is praying for you, men, feel free to go to Keith. And for the ladies, both Bailey and Levon have also expressed that. So I also want to remind us that, more than anything, more praise than anything, but Dan is a pretty recent addition to our eldership. With Jay and Dave and their health issues, there's been a lot on his plate. For one, I think he's stepped up and he's done phenomenally well. I have nothing but faith that he'll only get better with time. So I wanna ask and remind you guys to remember to be an encouragement to him. It's a heavy load to bear, and we should all do our part to try to make it lighter for him. All right. Today we're going to be in 1 Kings, specifically in chapter 18 and 19 today. And I want to talk about what happens when we get disappointed, or what happens when we get disheartened or discouraged. Learned a phrase in psych class a long time ago. At least it was a long time ago for me. But it said, anger and disappointment are both the results of failed expectations, right? Or unmet expectations. So basically, we get disappointed and we get angry when we have an expectation of either a person or a thing or an outcome or whatever, and that expectation is not met. And every disappointment and every anger can all be traced to that thing. That all comes from unmet expectations. So what's the easiest way to manage our anger? Manage your expectations. If you don't have expectations, there's nothing for you to be angry about, right? Also, I always just find it so awesome when I look at Scripture and things seem different than they did the last time I read through it. In chapter 18, we're in the story of Elijah. And he's confronting Jezebel and the prophets of Baal. So let me make sure I get my names and details right. So, and Asherah were the other prophets. There's 450 prophets of Baal and about 400 prophets of Asherah. So Elijah goes in and he challenges them, basically. He says, why don't we just make a pyre, right? You'll make a pyre, I'll make a pyre, and you'll pray to your God and make supplication and see if he'll light the pyre, light his own sacrifice. And when you're done, I'll do the same. And so the prophets of Baal get up and they're doing what they do, and they're chanting and screaming and cutting themselves and everything else that they could think of. And Elijah at this point, and there's so often I think most of us find humor in it, but he starts just cracking jokes at him, basically. He says, maybe you need to scream louder. Maybe he can't hear you. Maybe he's sleeping. You need to wake him up. Maybe you need to shed a little bit more, just going on and on, because he knows it's not going to work. And so finally it comes to his time, and he has them douse his pyre in water, and then calls on God, and God comes and he consumes that pyre, and then he consumes the pyre of Baal. And afterwards, now I'll just tell you, with the kind of things he says to the prophets of Baal, I'm convinced that Elijah probably got beat up in high school. All right? So after this all happens, God instructs Elijah, you're going to go, do not let the prophets of Baal live. They are all to be put to the sword. So that's exactly what happens. I want you to think about this. That's 450 people. Now, I'm not saying Elijah was in the wrong, all right? Don't jump ahead of me here. Because obviously he did what God told him to, so that's what was supposed to be done. But it's always been interesting practice to me to try to see the story from the other person's perspective. So Elijah, he's fleeing. He kills all these prophets, and then he runs. Because naturally, they want him dead. So he flees and he goes and takes refuge in this cave. And at this point, he kind of lets the depression sink in and the disappointment. And we're told that he even wants to die. Now, if you think that he was unfairly dealt with, this is where we get into what we talked about a few weeks ago, difference between fair and just. Was it just for them to pursue him? No. He had not committed sin. He obeyed God. He did what he did out of instruction. Was it fair? I don't know. The guy did just wipe out 450 people. I'm not saying it was right for them to kill him. I'm saying I think we can understand why they jumped to that conclusion. Right? So, and we're in chapter 19 where we're heading into. So he flees Jezebel, he flees her soldiers. And in verse 9 it says, there he came to a cave and lodged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Now, to preface that, you go back up to verse 4, and I want to go through the mindset that Elijah's in. He says he asked God that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. Now you go down to verse 7, and it says, and the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. Now, I want you to consider this. There are so many people that believe that life is just never going to throw anything at you that you're not strong enough for. And it's a lie. It's a lie that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel good. Elijah was a phenomenal prophet, very dedicated to God. But look at the words the angel chooses to use. The journey is too great for you. The journey ahead of you is bigger than what you can handle. So get up and let us provide you with strength. Now, Elijah's whole point, he asked God to die because he decided that he had done enough and that he had suffered enough. So then in verse 9, he's staying in this cave after this, and God comes to him. He says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." I think that if anything, it is something for us to consider: how zealous are we for God? Elijah, he doesn't say, "Oh, I'm passionate about God." He doesn't say, "Oh, I care about God." He doesn't say, "I live for God." He says, "I am jealous for the Lord." Now, we get down to what is jealousy and all this. The conclusion to all of this is Elijah is essentially saying he is angry. He is angry that the people of Israel have not committed to God. This is a man who sees people turn from God and takes it as a personal affront. Who views himself so much in line with the God he serves that he sees that he cannot see God offended without he himself being offended. Are we that zealous? I would argue that this is not foreign to us. There's so many people that'll tell you, "Oh, well, Christians aren't really Christians. They don't." I think a lot of you care about God a whole lot. I think there's quite a few of you that know what it means to be jealous for the Lord. But that can be exhausting. As Elijah is experiencing, it can be exhausting. Being jealous for the Lord, seeing people turn from God over and over and over, seeing people fail in their commitment to God, seeing people reject God when He's made plain to them. He says, "I've thrown down your they've thrown down your altars, they've killed your prophets, and I'm the only one left, and they're seeking to kill me too." Can you hear the pain? Can you understand the absolute depths of depression that Elijah's in? He's convinced he's the only one left that cares about God. Now, I can't speak to all of you, but I know there are times where I allow those thoughts in. There are times where I've thought to myself, I think I'm the only one left. I might be the only person left that thinks that this really matters. Which is silly, right? That's the whole point of us getting together on Sundays, so that I know that I'm not the only one left. But yet, during the week, there's times I convince myself that that's the case. God said in verse 11, "And he said, 'Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord.' And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.' The Lord said to him, 'Go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and Abel-Mohelah, and the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu be put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal and every mouth that has not kissed him.'" Elijah is absolutely convinced he's the only one left. God said, well, it's time to get to work. That's so amazing to us that sometimes we expect God to respond to things the way we want him to. And I'm sure Elijah really just wanted a nice word. Really just wanted some kind of encouraging thing for God to tell him, to keep him motivated, to tell him he matters, to tell him he's valid. And yet, what's God's response? It's time to go to work. It's time to go and anoint some people. It's time to go get things started. And by the way, you're not the only one. There's 7,000 people still. I think God knows that the best response to our disappointment and depression and feelings of failure is oftentimes not in the form of nice words or affirmation. It's purpose. And that's what Elijah was actually struggling with. What is the point? What's the point of me being here? I'm the only one left. No one's listening to me. They're all I'm here hiding in a cave. What's the point? So God's response, not to say something nice, but he answers the need that Elijah probably didn't even realize he had. And he goes and gives Elijah a purpose. Go do these things. It's tough when we're trying to serve God, when we're doing things that we believe are good, and we feel like other people don't care about it the way we care about it. Does that happen to any of you? And each person has their own hang-ups, right? This person might really care about benevolence. This person really cares about evangelism. This person really cares about education. They're all convinced that their thing is the most important thing. And without it, the rest of this all falls apart. And what you care about is actually only matters and only exists because of the thing I care about. This is how people think in general. And so when we are in a community and we feel like no one cares about our thing, it's really easy to grow disappointed. It's really easy to grow disheartened and just not want to do it anymore. But who's giving you your task? Because if it's a task you've assigned yourself, you're going to have a hard time sticking to it. Because the world does not care. In the grand scheme of things, the majority of the people will never care about the thing you care about as much as you care about it. I listen to a lot of lectures and seminars, and there's one that I listen to, and he talks to small business owners and helps them figure out personnel issues and stuff like this. And during one of the Q&As, a gentleman stood up and he asked the question, how do I get my employees to care about my business as much as I do? He goes, well, maybe you should just stop being an idiot and expecting that of them. Why would your employees care about your business as much as you do? That's your dream. Now point this all out, because in service to God, we somehow think it's different. Right? I very much care about spiritual depth. In all things, there is nothing in life that I can't look at and say this has spiritual implications. There's no decision that we can make that doesn't have some kind of spiritual implication or consequence. Every decision we make, every thought we make. And there's a part of me that wants so desperately to help everyone understand this. But if I'm being honest, most people are never really going to get 100% there. Most people are still going to look at certain things in their life and say, this doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with God. This has no implication on my relationship to God. And that's frustrating, right? Because that matters to me. It defines my whole relationship with God. And so I struggle to think that there are other people whose relationship looks different. Evangelism is hugely important to me. To me, I view it as the entire reason the church exists. It's so much so, and it's been so much a part of my mentality that at Grandview, when we attended there, the preacher used to make jokes about it. Right? He asked a question in Bible class one time, and he says, anyone other than Nathan answer this. And then after no one answered, he says, okay, Nathan, tell us why this matters about it, what this has to do with evangelism. The verse had absolutely nothing to do with evangelism. I still gave a 5-minute talk about why it mattered. But if I'm being honest, I understand, I have to recognize that not everybody's going to be as passionate about that area of service as I am. But it's frustrating, isn't it? It's downright exhausting. Because you care so much and you put so much energy and you put so much effort into it. And then you feel like you're alone on this island, even amongst fellow believers. Why does nobody care about this? Why does nobody see this? But who assigns your task? Do you teach Bible class because you want to be a teacher? Do you teach Bible class because maybe a church leader told you to? You teach Bible class because the kids asked you to? Because those are fluid, temporary things, circumstance. And people change just as often and as quick as the times themselves. But when we do it because God wants us to, because God tells us to, we find that the purpose never ends. It's so exhausting if you make it an intellectual exercise to recognize that there is never an end to the work. You are going to work for the kingdom until the day you stop breathing, and then you're going to still be in the kingdom doing a lot of the things you were doing anyways. And in our weak moments, we can be tired and grow really disheartened by all of that. I've talked oftentimes about how I initially had no desire to preach. I had no desire to stand before a congregation. And if I'm being honest, it was always kind of a foolish thing to think. I go to college convinced I'm not going to come out a preacher. But I had 3 write-ups at my job before college because I kept preaching on the line. I convinced myself that I wasn't adequate for public speaking. But I got in trouble and threatened with suspension because I stopped the entire paint line because they were all talking to me about God. It's the times when I convince myself that I do this for me that I grow tired. When I convince myself that this is the life I want, those are the times I get disheartened and disappointed and even depressed because I feel like I'm alone. But when I remember those things, when I remember that I was a preacher before I was a preacher, when I didn't want to be a preacher, it brings it all back into focus, that I'm doing this because God forces me to, really. Now, you might not like that choice of words, but there's other prophets, there's prophets that felt the same way. I can't stop talking about this. It's like my bones are burning up from the inside when I shut up about it. See, then you recognize that the task comes from God. And if God gave you the task, then the task never ends because God never ends. And the wonderful thing about it is, because God is ever present, it means you are never alone. You're never in this state Elijah thought he was in, where I'm the only one left. I might as well go ahead and die. Society feels that way. We see all the things in the world, the problems in society and in our communities, and we mourn them, and rightfully so. And we convince ourselves, oh man, I just wish Jesus would come back. I'm tired of this. The world's not going to get better. And it's not. People are getting more and more sinful by the day. They're not. Sin is sin. They've always been sinful. They'll continue being sinful. But you don't do this for them. If you did, the minute they said no, your job would be over. You don't do this for you. You're already a believer. You do this because God instructs us to do it. And I don't know that I have a great answer on why. Why does God demand this of us? Why does God put these tasks on us like he's not capable of going and sending angels to do it for him? I don't know why. Doesn't matter. Sometimes we forget that. We convince ourselves that if we can't make sense of it, then we don't have to listen to it, or we don't have to follow through with it. God usually does a pretty good job of explaining himself. And for those who are looking for those explanations, he does a pretty good job of providing them. But at the end of the day, he doesn't require that you understand why. Your salvation is based on whether you accept and obey. So while you may feel alone, like you're on an island, or maybe you just feel like we're alone, like this congregation is alone, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people just on this continent that care about God, that pray to the same God you do, that sing songs of worship to the same God you do, that mourn the same immorality that you do. There are millions all over the world gathered today on this very day, talking about this very God. We do our work for the kingdom because the kingdom exists. Because at the end of the day, we acknowledge and we know that there is a God in heaven. And so long as there's breath in our lungs and there's a God on the throne, I have purpose. It doesn't mean that you won't get disappointed still. It doesn't mean that you're not going to sometimes allow yourself to feel disheartened. I'm sure that the apostles faced plenty of disappointments. What it means is that we never have to hide alone in a cave wondering why we're still alive. If you're still breathing, there's still a God in heaven, and there's still work to be done. You're alive because you have a purpose in this kingdom. This morning, I want to encourage anyone who is struggling, whether you've given into the disappointments, whether you've given into the depression and given into the lies that we oftentimes tell ourselves or allow ourselves to hear, that we're here for you. That's what the brotherhood is all about, the community of saints, the bride of Christ. We exist so that nobody Nobody sits alone in a cave. So if you have somebody, if you're in need of calling out to somebody, bring it up. Call out to us. We all know what it's like to be in that situation in some form or another. We want to help you out. If you're somebody that doesn't enjoy a relationship with a God who saves, if you have yet to truly know the God that is in heaven, or you have a desire to serve Him, to give your life for the one who gave His life, we ask that you bring that forward too. Repent of a life of self and sin. Confess Jesus as your Lord. Be baptized for the cleansing of your soul. Whatever your needs are this morning, we ask that you bring them forward and make them known so we can help you see them met as we stand and sing.